So the Willsenton R8 tube amplifier review that I did a while back, about a year or so, has the most views on this channel. And rightfully so. It was a tube amplifier that performed way above its price point, and there's a good reason why it won the best award on our channel. And in fact, a lot of you have purchased it yourselves and have given feedback through emails and comments and so on. And I have to say, about 99.9% of you that have given feedback has been nothing but positive towards the amplifier. And when you think about an amplifier that performs like that at that kind of budget pricing, you have to wonder what the company can offer at a higher price point. Even if you can't afford it, right? Just has it in the back of your mind. What can it do? And a lot of you have been asking me to review exactly that, the R800i from Willsenton. And that's what we have here today. But before I go further, there's two versions to this amplifier. There's the 805 and the 845 version. That speaks to the output tubes we have here, the big tube, the biggest tube. This one is the 805 tube, and the other one is the 845 tube. Today, I only have the 805 version. 845 version, I cannot speak for because I don't have it here with me today. So, with that all being said, make sure to subscribe and click that bell notification so you don't miss any of it. And let's get straight to it. Now, before we go any further into the discussion of the 800i, I want to let you know that there is a big giveaway happening on this channel right now. So I'll link to the video down below, but there's a KEF home theater video that we did, and we're giving away the entire KEF system, 5.1.2. That amounts to a subwoofer, surround, Dolby Atmos modules. So make sure to watch that video and a setup guide. And we haven't done too much in terms of home theater on this channel, but that's going to change very quickly because we also love home theater, and we believe that all of you should definitely experience it at one point in your lifetime. Now, back to stereo. So the Willsenton R800i is one of the tube amplifiers I've been playing around with for about 5 to 6 months. And there's a good reason I've been playing around with it for that long. It's not because I'm lazy. They've been moving from a small factory, Willsenton, have been moving from a small factory to a bigger factory. They've asked me to hold off on the review until their move is finished so that they can actually deliver the products properly. And that speaks to their devotion because with the R8, the problem was they couldn't ship it fast enough because there was such high demand and they couldn't produce as fast as they intended. Now, another change that has brought to the table with the R800i version is that now they have something called an export version, which means that all the units that you will be purchasing are superior than the domestic versions, from my understanding. And from what they've told me, the changes are the high, gloss finish, the beautiful finish on this unit that is only available for export finish. And the parts inside are higher quality. So there's a little bit of part upgrade inside the unit. And they go through an extra quality assurance, basically quality check so that you get the best, ones for less issues to arise overseas. So I think these are all good, implications. And from my understanding, there is a price difference from a domestic version and an export version, but it's only $100 difference. And I think that's definitely worth it for what you're getting. And all this together, this is still under $2,000 MSRP in US dollars. And of course, you have to account for shipping. This is before shipping. So after shipping, I would say about $500 could be added, $500 to $800. So let's review this at under $3,000. Even then, this is just absolutely crazy, tremendous deal. And we'll talk about that. But the reason the shipping is so much is because it's coming from overseas, from China, obviously. And this unit is about 100 pounds. It is extremely, extremely backbreaking and heavy. And it uses big tubes, and I won't list all the tubes here because you can see them, and you can see them on the manufacturer website. But essentially, the two tubes that I want to kind of draw your attention to is the 805 and the 300B, because these are directly related to the output stages. This amplifier produces 48 watts per channel, and it creates a very nice tubey sound that these tubes are known for. It has a combination of the sweetness in the high frequency that the 300Bs are known for, and a little bit of that bass control and brute force that the 805 is capable of. And it outputs 48 watts in single-ended, so class A. I have to say I have a lot of gear on my rack right now, from budget to very expensive solid state tube amplifier and so on. But on this rack, it is one of my favorite gear, period. And it's one of those pieces that really gets me thinking. I have all these opportunities to purchase and really enjoy a lot of high-end solid-state amplifiers and really well-measuring gear. However, every time I go back to the Willsenton R800i, it speaks to my soul, and it is an entirely different experience. And I have to say, it reminds me that I'm a tube person, that I'm a tube guy, tube lover, whatever you want to call it. Because every time I listen to the R800i, I get emotionally attached to the music. It draws me in ways that I cannot describe in simple words, which I will attempt to in this video, but again, unexplainable sometimes. Now, it could be, you could argue that it is psychological with the tubes glowing and the meters going on this beautiful unit. But when I turn off the light and close my eyes, there's no denying it. And sometimes when people comment like, there's no difference between tube amplifiers and solid state amplifiers, I just cannot, disagree enough. We can agree to disagree. But for me personally, it just makes me smile because I have the ability to switch back and forth here in the studio all the time, and the differences are so obvious. And I've done blind A/B testing before, and I come out on top every single time with tube amplifier and solid state. It is not like cables. It is very obvious difference, at least for me. The problem is that this is definitely not for every speakers. You have to understand that. Often I get questions, can I go with this speaker or that speaker? Look at the sensitivity rating. That's the first thing. So every speaker has a sensitivity rating. For example, the Tecton speakers I have here, or the Eclipse Forte speakers that I reviewed in the past, all work extremely well with this amplifier. And it's safe to say I've tried a lot of sensitive speakers with this tube amplifier, and it just sounds absolutely gorgeous. Plenty of power, plenty of headroom. And I would say with sensitive speakers, this is a tube amplifier that can work in small, medium, large, even large rooms. However, when it comes to non-sensitive speakers, I would say around 86 dB or so. It drives it, but when it comes to really demanding tracks where the bass has to really kick in, for example, Madness is a good track, or James Blake, Limit to Your Love. These tracks, when you crank it at higher volumes, definitely the amp starts to struggle to deliver that kind of brute force and power, especially in the lower frequencies. Impedance graphs also matter. If your speakers, dip down to really low impedances, then the chances are the tube amplifier is going to probably struggle. So these are the things that you want to check, and that's why I say sometimes measurements do matter, because it can give you a good indication on if this tube amplifier is the right choice for you, and right choice, more importantly, for your speakers. Now, looking at the back of this unit, you see very high quality binding posts and inputs. Something that you don't really see in this price category, and I cannot emphasize this enough. The quality and craftsmanship is quite up there in my opinion with this unit. Now, looking at the unit itself, it doesn't have any pre-outs, so it cannot be used as a preamplifier. That's the first thing. However, it is a little bit different from the Willsenton R8 in that this unit can be used as just an amplifier. It has a section called pre-in, which makes this, compatible with preamplifiers, and the volume control is done by your preamplifier and not the amplifier. So be careful when you're using this, input. You're using a preamplifier. If you connect it directly to your DAC, then the full brute force of this amplifier will be on your speakers. So, the labels are pretty self-explanatory, so make sure to check up on that. Other than that, the other feature on this amplifier that I find very, very nice is, again, just like the Willsenton R8, the self-biasing and hum control, hum balancing, as they call it. So here I'll show you how to bias the Willsenton R800i and also use the hum balancer. But before you do any of this, make sure to turn on the unit and let the unit warm up for about 30 minutes or so, just so that tubes are all warmed up and ready to be biased. Now, once you've done that, you want to change your VU meter from VU, the middle switch, and you want to bring it down. So that is now on the bias meter selection. So once you've done that, on the left side, you have something called a bias current. And if you toggle back and forth between V1 and V2, it will show you your current adjustment. And so V1 is the left channel and V2 is the right channel, and it is clearly labeled on the chassis, so it is easier for you to tell, which is nice. And it's very easy to do. Now, if you do, check it out and you find that it is too low or too high, all you have to do is use a very small flathead screw like this and go in here and adjust it. And I'll show you a better angle here as well. But anyways, that's how you adjust both, and you can keep checking back and forth until you got it right. And on the manual, it will tell you exactly what number you're supposed to set it at. Now you want to be careful, and you want to set it at the number on the lower side, so at the bottom, not the top. So the lower number, the smaller letters on the bottom, is what you want to set it to. Now, if you have any doubts or questions, make sure to message the manufacturer or whoever you're buying from and ask them questions. But this is pretty self-explanatory, and it is in the manual. Now, another feature that's nice on this unit is the hum balancer, which is above the bias adjustment. And this is basically to reduce the hum if you have any. Now, currently, I don't really have any in my system. In the beginning, I did, but with break-in and over time, it goes away. So don't be frightened if you get this unit and suddenly you have hum in the beginning. It is bound to go away once the unit breaks in and warms up your tubes and such. Now, even if you have some hums, you can adjust the hum balancer, and you want to adjust both sides and try to get the hum to at lowest levels possible, and that's very easily done. It's the same way with the bias adjustment, except you don't look at any meters and you just go at it until you hear the lowest noise floor from both of your speakers connected. Another thing that makes this amplifier such a beautiful amplifier is the meters in the front. Now this works as, again, for your biasing, but also it works for when you're listening to music and the meters dance to it. So it has a VU meter, and you can basically turn it off if you don't want the lights on, but you can also turn it on for that beautiful blue light. And when you turn all the lights off, it just adds to the mood and the ambience and really gets you into the mood of listening to tube amplifiers. Now, talking about the sound of this unit. Now, this is not a perfectly quiet amplifier. Let's be straight here. The signal to and the noise ratio on this amplifier is probably higher than other offerings on the market. For example, the Fez Audio that I have here. The Fez Audio here use toroidal transformers, and I do have to thank my Patreon Darren for lending me this unit, and he's been of great help with this review. And like I've mentioned, the Fez Audio uses toroidal output transformers and has a really good measurement in terms of noise to signal to noise ratio, and it just has a quieter background and so on. But the tube amplifier I have here, the Willsenton, is not perfectly the most quiet amplifier in the world. So if that's what you're looking after, this is not it. However, when it comes to the sound of this amplifier, it is absolutely gorgeous. When it comes to the mid-range of this amplifier specifically, It has everything that you would want from a tube amplifier mid-range. It has smoothness, liquidity, and first of all, it is way more tube-like than the Willsenton R8 in the mid-section. And if you talk about high-end tube amplifiers, this is essentially what they provide, is this beautiful mid-range. When I hear a tube amplifier and I know that it's done right or done not so good, usually this is what I look for, the mid-range. And the mid-range on this is just absolutely right and to die for. In fact, it is much better than the Willsenton R8. The mid-range is much tube-like, and if you put any word out there to describe a good tube amplifier in the mid-range, it will apply to the Willsenton R800i. It is full, it has the full bloom, warm sound characteristic. Every guitar, every string, you can feel and hear it in your room as if you're there, and gives you the most realistic, at least to me, presentation. And it's not, you're not hearing notes anymore, you're hearing actual music. The musicality on the mid-range is just absolutely to die for. Female vocals, male vocals have this beautiful projection. You can hear the lip smacks and all the details, yet it is never sharp, just liquid smooth, and it's as if the person is right there. It has this vivid holography to it. So again, that holographic sound is very present in the mid-range, and there's no denying that. A good tube amplifier will provide you with this, and at this price point, this produces as any good mid-range as any tube amplifier that I've heard, regardless of price range, in my opinion. Now, when it comes to the bass, bass is something that could be a little bit of a challenge for some people. This doesn't have the fastest bass, it doesn't have the tightest bass out there, especially compared to solid-state amplifiers or even the Willsenton R8. Even the Willsenton R8 have a tighter and faster and hard-hitting bass. This has great bass, don't get me wrong. It is able to extend down low and deliver that power when it's matched with the right speakers, like sensitive speakers, like the Klipsch Forte, Tecton, and so on. However, it is more of a tasteful bass. It is not exaggerated, and in fact, it is again, that full bloom warm sound that is tied in with the mid-range. There's no bleeding into the mid-range. However, the bass is definitely not the tightest, not the fastest. However, I wouldn't classify this as a slow or tube bass where the bass is a little bit lacking in speed. The speed is about right, but it is not slow in my opinion. So the bass is something that you may have to come to like. But for me, and I like fast bass, that's where I come from. To me, it didn't feel like it's slow, just not too fast. Now, when it comes to the high frequency is interesting. So this is where things can change a little bit. With the stock tubes, this sounds a little bit kind of rolled off. In fact, the high frequency is very smooth. So if you're someone who's very prone to fatigue, then this unit definitely with the stock tubes is great for you. Now, I've rolled many tubes with this unit, and one of the tubes that I rolled was the replica of the Western Electric 300B, which is one of the best tubes, arguably, in the tube world. It's also collectible. But this is the replica by Pasvain, I believe. And changing to this 300B tube allowed this tube amplifier to keep that kind of rolled off presentation, so the high frequency is never bright, but the mid-range was just way better. And I thought it was just so good with the stock tubing, but with the change of the Western Electric tube, the mid-range was something that just to die for. I mean, I think it's even better than some of the higher offerings that I've heard from many companies. And again, tubes matter with tube amplifiers. So what you choose to use, again, this is a pretty expensive tube. So, but the outcome to me was worth it. Now, when it comes to the output tubes, I changed it to the Pasvain ones as well. And I'll link to all the tubes I'm listing here in the description below because we're going through a lot. But the output tubes also allowed the high frequency to be a little bit more refined, even though it was, kind of rolled off and kind of, smooth sounding. It still gave me details and I didn't feel like I was missing anything. And that was what the Pizvane output tubes really brought to the table, is that refinement in the high frequency and a little bit more detail retrieval and micro details. Now, another tube that I tried was the 300B tubes from Pizvane. This is one of their, top offerings. That's not a replica. And I will, again, link to everything in the description below. But this tube, unlike the Western Electric tube that I was using, it had a lot more detail on the top end. And in fact, it opened up the high frequencies a lot more. And so now you had air, excitement, so people that like rock or so on could really like this. So it had a little bit more of a brighter characteristic, yet not, fatiguing bright, but more air and more detail and so on. So just a little bit of different presentation overall. So the high frequency and overall mid-range beauty can be modified and upgraded depending on the tubes you are using. And I found that, there are tube amplifiers that are, very small to change, when you change tube amplifiers. And then there are tube amplifiers that, give you a lot when the tubes are changed. I find that this tube amplifier is the latter, where you change the tube amplifier, the tubes in the amplifier, and the change is quite big and quite noticeable. So I find that to be quite, exciting because I like changing stuff and testing it out and so on. But in the stock tube format, this tube amplifier, again, is just fine. It just sounds gorgeous. It's just that when you change the tubes in it, you really can't go back when you know how better it is. And definitely you get that feeling of getting a lot more for your purchase and for the tube amplifier's full potential. Now, in terms of sound staging and imaging, I would say that the imaging is quite good on this unit for a tube amplifier, but it's not going to be as good as a solid state amplifier. It has good imaging as long as you place your speakers correctly and really play around with your speaker placement. However, the center imaging and the side, little details that you can pick up and really place your instruments and so on is a lot better and sharper on solid state amplifiers. That's not what this amplifier is about. However, when it comes to sound staging, the depth and width, this is one of the things that I kind of, gets me baffled when people say they don't hear a difference between a tube amplifier and a solid state amplifier is, the soundstage and the holographic, soundstage, the depth, the layering. It is so apparent on this unit. It is almost scary. You get this vivid soundstage as if the person's there. You get this holographic, presentation where you can actually feel and hear the instrument as if it was played in somewhere in the room. And then it's not something to be taken lightly because this is what you get the tube amplifier for. The holographic soundstage, the depth, the fullness of the sound that kind of surrounds you is something unforgettable and something that's really that's what draws people into the tube world. And when I listen to solid state amplifiers, again, I have access to really well measuring gear, really powerful gear, really high end solid state gear, and I listen to them all day long. But when it comes down to my musical enjoyment and emotional music, musicality, I always choose the R800i, and I cannot wait to hook this back up for my personal taste and enjoyment, because it just gives you everything that you would ask for from a music lover perspective. I'm not analyzing music when I'm listening to this. I'm just sitting there and being emotionally connected to the music that matters to me. And that's what this tube amplifier is about. Again, this amplifier is heavy. You need help lifting it, and shipping cost is going to be pretty expensive. However, even factoring after all that in, this tube amplifier at the price point of under $3,000, let's say, with shipping, is an absolute steal of a deal. Let me give you an example. The Fez audio that my Patreon lent to me, thank you Darren, again, is a 300B output tube, and it's 8 watts per channel. Now, it has less power, and that's the first thing, but that's not everything. I'm perfectly fine if it has less power but sounds better. However, it competes with this, but in a different way. In fact, I find that this tube amplifier is more of a competition to the Willsenton R8, as it sounds very, very similar. In fact, I would say that the fuzz is slightly better and more refined and quieter, but overall the dynamics, the sound quality and everything, Willsenton R8 is very similar. It kind of baffled me how similar it is. And when mated with sensitive speakers, switching back and forth, I hands down prefer the R800i. And the reason being is, again, that beautiful mid-range. And don't get me wrong, the Fez audio does have that beautiful mid-range, and so does the Willsenton R8. But the R800i is on another level. A level that, you can really put, up to really high-end tube amplifiers of the similar offering and say, wow, that really competes at this price, 20,000 versus, 2,000 or whatnot. And absolutely, the quality of parts on the higher end units may be better and maybe more extensive, more heavier, more output power. For example, some of the conversion audio, monoblock amplifier that I, listened to and reviewed in the past is like 200 watts per channel in class A or something like that. It's ridiculous. However, that is really big, and each of them are like 300 pounds or something. Ridiculous amount of power. This is not that. However, in terms of the overall sound signature within the 48 watt, rating is very similar and gives you that euphoria and emotional, connection it provides. In fact, out of the tube amplifiers, and I have a few on the rack here right now that you don't see, this is by far the best one that I've heard and the one I enjoy the most personally. And again, it has to do with that mid-range. You have to like the tube mid-range. And let me tell you, I have not come across a single person yet that does not like tube mid-range. When they hear it, they fall for it. Even if they deny it first, they eventually come around because it's just that musical. And when you listen to, solid state amplifiers, that measure very well and stuff, versus a very good tube amplifier like this one, is comparing notes versus actual instruments. That's how different it is of an experience, in my opinion. And like I said, I have all these options, but every time I listen to it, it just draws me back to how great this tube amplifier really is. And again, this is a beautiful piece. Anyhow, I absolutely love this tube amplifier, if you cannot tell, and I highly, highly do recommend it. So if this video was helpful to you, please consider clicking that like button. It does help us out a lot and it doesn't cost you anything. And also consider joining our Patreon for supporting this channel, and also to keep us this channel unbiased and keep us going in the future. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys on the next one.